A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick, Christys and Mercy Muroki on your TV, radio and online. Massive show today. The end of free parking for nurses. I'm making the case that Joe Biden should not be running America. In fact, I'm not sure he even is. And as well, there's another Prophet Muhammad scandal involving a teacher.
Yes, so we'll be talking about the very serious issue as well of Baby P's mother being imminently released from prison after the parole board approved that decision. Well, make sure you get in touch with your views as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email, and we'll get to those throughout the programme. But first, let's give you the headlines.
Good morning, it's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian forces are preparing for new Russian attacks, with British intelligence suggesting heavy fighting is likely to take place in the suburbs of Kyiv in the coming days. This morning, President Volodymyr Zelensky was given a standing ovation as he addressed the Australian Parliament. Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced more funds and aid for Ukraine and labelled Russia's Vladimir Putin a war criminal before handing the floor to President Zelensky. He warned Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world and said stronger sanctions are still needed.
Whatever is happening in our region because of the Russian aggression, what is destroying the lives of people, has become a real threat to your country and to your people as well, because this is the nature of the evil. It can instantly cross any distance. Russian representatives, official propagandists, they are openly discussing the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who don't want to subdue.
Volodymyr Zelensky speaking there. In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisors are scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people and that Putin's overestimated the abilities of his military to secure a rapid victory.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
The Foreign Secretary will urge India to join allies in opposing Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Liz Truss is in New Delhi for talks with her counterpart. It follows concerns the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is reluctant to publicly condemn Moscow's actions. India's abstained in a series of votes in the United Nations on the issue, and earlier this month it agreed to import 3 million barrels of heavily discounted Russian oil. An MSP is calling for 11,000 empty military homes to be used to accommodate refugees fleeing Ukraine. Gordon MacDonald has written to the Defence Secretary urging him to bring the unoccupied properties owned by the MOD back into use. The Home Office has announced 2,700 visas have so far been granted under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. In other news, households are expected to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living squeeze. New analysis from Labour combined tax hikes, food, energy and fuel prices, as well as mortgage costs. As the party launches its local election campaign, leader Sir Keir Starmer's pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600, funded by a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. Thousands of pounds worth of goods have reportedly been stolen from David and Victoria Beckham's London mansion. It's believed the burglary happened late in the evening while they were at home with their 10-year-old daughter at the end of February. Officers responded just after midnight on March the 1st. The Met Police says no arrests have been made and inquiries are continuing. From tomorrow, free COVID tests will no longer be available for most people under the government's new plans. Only hospital patients who have symptoms and people at higher risk of contracting the virus will be eligible for free tests. The Department of Health says it'll still be able to ramp up testing if needed. And Tesco's pledged to become the first supermarket chain to go peat-free on its British-grown bedding plants. When harvested, vast quantities of carbon are released into the atmosphere, accelerating climate change. Working to reduce its carbon footprint, the company has vowed to cut its use of the material by 95% from Monday. And they vowed to remove all peat from its bedding plant range by 2023. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now. It's back to Patrick and Mercy, and to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki. I'm Patrick Christys on your TV, radio and online. We have another show full of all the stories you need today to know. Our frank opinions and your views as well, so here's what's on the menu.
Yes, massive show today, ladies and gentlemen. Despite indicating a scale back in operations, Russian forces reportedly escalated their bombardment of Ukraine yesterday. We'll be live with a member of the Ukrainian Parliament for the latest news from the front lines.
Yes, and tomorrow, back here at home, free parking for NHS staff in hospitals will end across England. It was introduced during the pandemic in what the government called a perk, but despite calls for it to continue, it will now come to an end. Well, we'll be joined by an MP who's been campaigning hard on this issue for years, and we'll be asking him why he thinks the taxpayer should foot the bill for staff parking.
Yes, and polar ship, the RRS Sir David Attenborough. Isn't that the one they wanted to call Boaty McBoatface?
I think it is.
Yes, it is. Anyway, right, has had a successful maiden voyage during Antarctic ice trials. We'll be talking to a special guest from the British Antarctic Survey about what ice trials are, why they're important, and why it wasn't called Boaty McBoatface.
Yes, well, we have all of that coming up and much more as well across the programme, and you can get in touch with your views, as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. But first, Patrick gives his views on so-called President Sleepy Joe Biden, which is... But OK, before Patrick gives his views...
There's been an update, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, there has. Well, after indicating it would scale back operations to foster trust between the two sides, Russia's forces reportedly escalated their bombardment of Ukraine yesterday, but there has been widespread reports of Russian soldiers refusing to carry out orders in Ukraine, and now new intelligence suggests soldiers have sabotaged their equipment and even accidentally shot down one of their own aircraft.
Yes, well, the head of one of the government security agencies, GCHQ, Chief Sir Jeremy Fleming, said, quote, "We believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth." He added that there was evidence of low morale among Russian soldiers who were poorly equipped. Well, we are joined now by Alexei Goncharenko, Ukrainian MP, to give us the latest on the ground. Alexei, thank you very much. Last time we spoke to you, you were at the scene of an on-air strike, I believe. What's been going on since then?
Hello, now I am in Kharkiv. It's the second biggest city of Ukraine, just 30 kilometers from border with the Russian Federation. And now I am staying in a very special building. It is called the House of Word, because in the beginning of 20th century, the best Ukrainian writers, poets lived in this house. And it was built for those artists, writers, poets, and cultural people who are active in cultural activity. And in 1930s, almost all people who lived here were killed by Stalin in his repressions. And now you see, and that's why they are called in Ukraine, in our history, that it is a renaissance which was shoot. And you see again that Russians are again shooting at this building, which is the symbol of this renaissance, cultural renaissance of Ukraine. And after 80 years, I don't know, have you heard it? That's a cannonade, it's a shelling, because Russians are continuing shelling on Kharkiv, on the city, and that's the situation.
So we were hearing initially, weren't we, that Russia was scaling back, that it was pulling back. But that's not true as far as you're aware, is it?
No, it's not true. Russia lost the battle near Kiev. They tried to take Kiev, then they tried to encircle Kiev. They lost this battle. They have very high losses near Kiev. That's why they are just retreating. But they decided to call this retreat, that it is some kind of a step for peace. Like always fake, like always lie. Probably they want to just regroup and refresh their forces. That's the only thing. But they are continuing attacks in eastern Ukraine, in southern Ukraine, and Putin is not going to stop. The only thing that can stop him is force. That's why we need air defense, aircraft, just to stop Russians in the air, like we stopped them on the ground.
Yes, and I was listening to a gentleman on the radio yesterday, and he started this campaign to inform Russians about what's really going on in Ukraine, and he was saying there's still so many people in Russia who don't even believe that a war is taking place. I mean, to what extent do you think many Russians are still in denial because there is simply not a free press in Russia, and what is actually happening is not being properly reported?
You know, from one point of view, yes, the propaganda is guilty for what's happening in their heads. But from another point of view, sorry, but there is internet. Yes, Facebook now doesn't work there, Instagram doesn't work there, but YouTube works there. And they can just go and watch your show. I have on my YouTube more than 500,000 followers, and part of them are from Russia. And I am doing my YouTube partly in Russian language. So they can do it and they can see all the picture if they really want to. I want to tell you that it's not only Putin who is guilty and who is mad, but the whole Russian society is very sick and very militaristic, aggressive, and that is the problem. And the denazification really needed for them because they are really conducting as Nazis. I don't know, have you heard? That's continuing shelling on 1.5 million population city, and like hundreds of people already killed here, including children and women. So when they're saying, we don't know about the war, probably it means that they don't want to know about the war, because if they really do want, it's not hard to find the information, but it's easier for them to believe that they're here liberating us from something. But they're only liberating us from kindergartens, maternity house, hospitals, schools, and killing us.
And there are some pictures today in the British press of what appear to be Russian military uniforms just strewn around, apparently deserted equipment, etc. Is it true that some Russians now, so quite a lot of Russian soldiers, according to these pictures, are deserting? They're running away?
Yes, that's true. That's true. Their moral is very low. Many of them don't understand what they're doing here. And certainly after big losses, their moral became even less because they see that their friends are dying in thousands here. And it's hard to understand for what. And they are on the absolutely another country's territory. They are not on their land like we are on our land. We are fighting for our land. And what they are doing here. So yes, many of them are deserting and their moral is low and they are dying here in thousands. That's the situation. But for Putin, it's nothing. For Putin, the life of any person is nothing. Ukrainians, British, who they like in Salisbury, Russians, his own nation, Russians, for him it's nothing, absolutely. He just wants to continue his aggression, that's all.
OK, well, look, Alexei Goncharenko, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Ukrainian member of parliament there. And
thank you. And please support us and help us with the weapons. That's the only thing we ask. We will do everything ourselves. We will defend the free world and our values. But we need weapons. OK, well, I'm sure that message has been heard loud and clear. And thank you. You're a very brave man because obviously you've come outside. You've come outside to talk to us. Well, let's let you get going and get back inside or whatever, OK?
Absolutely. And, of course, he did express some strong opinions there, but those are, of course, his opinions.
Those opinions, about about the Russian people, but obviously there we go.
Yes, well, now we will finally go to Patrick's monologue, and he's going to be giving his opinion on so-called Sleepy Joe.
The COVID theatre continues. Joe Biden is on a big vaccination push. The only problem is he has no idea why he's doing it. Yesterday, the US president took to the stage to show his citizens that everyone should be jabbed up to the eyeballs. But there was an issue. Just check this video out. For our radio listeners, it's Joe Biden on stage about to get his second booster jab.
So now I'm going to get my second booster shot. I'm not sure why I'm doing it on stage. I'm just people don't get it.
Are there enough funds?
So what you may have just about been able to hear right at the start there as he shuffles over to his nurse is Joe Biden saying, "I'm not sure why I'm doing this on stage." Well, Joe, that's because you're just a prop for whoever actually is running the United States. Even the president has no idea why he's taking part in this vaccine virtue signalling, which kind of diminishes this video of him launching COVID.gov, a one-stop shop for everything coronavirus related.
Today I announced a one-stop shop to get any and everything you need to deal with COVID. Go to covid.gov. covid.gov.
I mean, you can just tell that this man has no idea what day of the week it is. The White House staff have to follow Joe Biden around with a big mop and a bucket, cleaning up the mess after everything he says. The amount of clarifications the White House puts out is an absolute joke. He's not fit to be president. I don't really think he's fit to do anything these days, in my opinion. A lot of people focus on this clip as a sign of his cognitive decline, where he mixes up Ukraine and Iran.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom.
Yeah, I'm sure he won't gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. But anyway, this is the clip, though. This is the clip that everyone should really be focusing on, where he gives Vladimir Putin the green light to invade Ukraine.
Be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc.
You know, in my opinion, that is the most visible sign of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. He completely revealed America's hand. He stitched up NATO in the process, gave Putin the go-ahead and basically announced what would happen in Ukraine before it actually did. Look what's happening now. It appears, anyway, although we're hearing mixed reports on this, of course, that Putin is somewhat scaling back. It looks as though potentially Putin will take Donbass, a couple of other regions, and possibly leave it at that. Certainly, there will have been an incursion and then some negotiations about what to do afterwards, which is what Joe Biden essentially said he'd be fine with. Tens of thousands of people have died, though, Joe. Innocent civilians, women and children. Joe Biden has played a massive role in that. But he probably doesn't even remember saying it. His withdrawal from Afghanistan was shambolic as well. The fact is, Joe Biden's incompetence and, in my opinion anyway, lack of cognitive function poses a real and present danger. America is supposed to be a beacon of democracy, so much so that it's engaged in a policy of trying to bring that so-called democracy to the Middle East, Africa, everywhere, really. But the fact is, Joe Biden isn't running America. There's no way anyone can convince me that this guy is making the decisions. He's like a dopey Thunderbird. He's just a puppet with goodness knows who pulling his strings. And so my conclusion there is that in the Western home of democracy, they don't even have an elected leader. I'm probably off the Christmas card list.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's not much more to add to that. I think it's fair to say he's past his heyday, really, hasn't he? I mean, he is incredibly old. They have a habit of electing leaders of age, shall we say, in America. But let's not forget that Donald Trump also had a myriad, an endless list of misspeaks and mishaps as well. Though his, in my opinion, were not of the global security threatening nature. They were often unpleasant. They were often quite unethical. But Joe Biden has made a lot of slip-ups. But look, he was elected by the American people with a massive Democratic mandate, despite what, some people say about the legitimacy of the election. Look, he was elected by the American people. They got who they voted for. This is who they have to put up with for the next few years.
Absolutely. I get all that. I'm not, suggesting that he should be deposed or anything like this. I'm saying I'm, well within my rights to suggest that
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're the first in your family to go to university, so whatever challenges your childhood presented, it didn't stop you going to university. How did you find it?
Never felt like a student. I was always like a townie who was doing a degree and a little bit apprehensive about it. None of my friends really had gone to university. They're all trained as plumbers and electricians and that kind of thing. And it was completely not what I expected, a lot more down to earth. And I studied politics, so you can decide whether that was useful or not.
You say you played hard and you worked hard. You did your schoolwork too. You get into Oxford.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. But I just was like a fish out of water, like, for most of it, to be honest. Although I did make some really good friends there.
Why were you a fish out of water?
State educated, northern girl doing science. And the work is really, really hard. It's completely different. What I realised was everybody else had had a lot of coaching, a lot of extra tuition, a lot of support. There was no teaching, really. It's just like, here's an exercise book, get on with it. Crushed my confidence immediately, which, having gone from being this sort of clever, like, oh, you're out of 2,000 kids in this sixth form college in Manchester, we want you to sort of apply for, I was the only one who got in out of that, to basically being made to feel like I was totally thick, is quite crushing.
Did your parents separate when you were young? Do you know your dad?
They separated when I was 10. My father left home for, strangely, with a woman round the corner. I have to say it's probably it made things more difficult financially, but it also made me probably appreciate what I've actually had, what I then had in the future, so to speak. So.
when you get abuse on Twitter or wherever, does it ever make you stop and think, am I right? Because this is quite a barrage.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of these people who occasionally likes to stick my neck out with things. Some can say that's being a little populist or deliberately controversial. These are all things that I do genuinely believe in. And I always say that, you know, if you don't believe something, don't say it.
Has it ever become more than just social media abuse?
I think where it crossed the line for me is when they start making comments about your family or threats and so on. And I think after I made the comment about taking the knee, I had one particularly unpleasant message that was sent to me. And it said basically about kneeling on my children's necks until they were dead because they wanted me to feel that pain. I had to speak to my wife about that just to say, look, please don't get upset with this. Don't take it too personally. It's just idiots on a keyboard. It's not going to happen in real life. But I think sometimes people forget in terms of the security we have. My house, you know, it's been fitted with panic alarms and new locks and everything. And in my case, it was just a threat. The police dealt with it. They were great and so on. But it just does make you worry in future that something actually bad could happen.
You described Facebook as a morality-free zone.
I was being unkind to them that day, I think. Yeah. Facebook is a bit of a cult, let's be honest about it. I mean, it just appears to have a different agenda, in fact, than the other social media companies. And they have a huge impact on society, so therefore, they do need to engage properly with political process. I would like to see them take the approach that I do think some of the other ones are taking. We don't want to see society crumble. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to work to ensure that our platforms are still free, but at the same time, they still have at least an understanding of the social harms that can happen and proper processes in place in order to combat those. Facebook needs to come a long way towards that, and they're not doing it yet.
Lucy, would you like to lead your party one day?
I don't think I would. No, not really. I think the cost on one's actual life would just be far, far, far too great, to be honest. As women, we do weigh up those costs a lot more, the cost to our family, the cost to our lives. I think as women, we do generally, we wear that responsibility is weighted on us a lot more.
The Tory women seem to, I mean, come on, because they've done better. They've done better, considerably better than the Labour Party.
I know, but to be fair, there is I'm not being disparaging about it, but there is a sort of a different sort of culture with maybe people who are a bit posher about boarding schools and nannies and things like that. It's not quite the same as, you know, trying to pair up the socks and deal with the homework.
In a nutshell, what is car share? Easiest way to describe car share is like an Airbnb equivalent for cars. We enable car owners who have a car they're not using very much, or two cars, the second one being not used very much, to be able to share and rent those cars out to other people who live nearby. We call them renters. The renters can then access those cars through an application and open the car simply through the phone. So we enable owners to share cars and rent them to renters.
So it's connected to the car and it's showing you exactly which car it is.
Yeah, so this is, I'm now in rental.
Yeah.
As I get closer to the car, the phone connects to the car through Bluetooth. So there's no signal required, no phone signal.
Okay.
So that's all eradicated. This is now Bluetooth into the car.
Okay.
The functions to unlock and lock the car are now live. So if we unlock the car, you'll see it flash, hopefully. That's unlock.
Wow.
That's just unlock the car. So I'll get in the car now. Car's open. Off we go.
Wow. All through your phone?
Yeah.
I know you're also very keen to stress the environmental implications of what you're trying to do here with car share. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of environmental kind of positioning for the business such as ours. I mean, the most easiest one to sort of explain is that, and this isn't just our own survey, this is surveys done with Como UK, which is like the car sharing charity body for the UK businesses like ourselves. They've proven that for every one car shared, it can take up to 10 others off the road, which means that 10 other cars don't need to be produced or replaced if others are saying, look, I seldom use my car. Do you know what? I don't want to replace it with another vehicle. I'm going to use a car sharing scheme like car share to access cars when I need them. So that's a big deal, actually. Taking that number of cars off the roads
creates such big positive benefits.
The industrial processes that go into making the actual physical car.
Of course. So imagine if we were producing half as many cars, how much emissions we would save right at the start of the process. The other great thing, of course, is that when cars are shared, the people that use them, that rent them, do it because they're purpose-driven. They don't pop to the shops and therefore hire a car to go to Sainsbury's 10 minutes. They do proper activities, seeing things, seeing people, seeing places. So it reduces that short number of trips, which is really positive. The other aspect is the more cars we can take off our streets because of that, lack of replacement, people sharing more and people accessing more, there is more space on our streets. In some cities, congestion can be 25% or 25% of the congestion can be caused by the lack of a parking space. We're driving around for 20 minutes trying to find a place to park your car. With less cars in the future on our streets, much easier to find a space that congestion eases and the pollution eases.
Where did you grow up and what did your parents do for a living?
Well, I am a product of the Union. I was conceived in Cardiff, apparently. I was born in London and I grew up in Scotland and then back to Cardiff when I was about 13 or 14. My mum was a hairdresser and had her own mobile business. She had a salon before my brother and I were born, but then after that she did hairdressing in the house, or she then went and did a mobile business. And my dad worked in insurance. He was a manager for a big insurance company. Hence why he was living all around the country.
Were you the first in your family to go to university?
I was, yes. I went to Exeter University, and that's where I really cut my political teeth.
That was when you became a Conservative, when you were a student.
I was.
Unusual.
I have been in the Conservative Party most of my adult life. I joined the first week I went to Exeter. I was sitting in a corridor waiting to be interviewed for the university magazine, and I started talking to this young man who was doing the same, and he told me after our conversation that I was a Conservative and I should join Exeter University Conservative Association, and he was going to be chairman, and that was one Robert Halfon.
Really?
Yes.
My goodness, imagine if you'd been sat in that corridor with one Jeremy Corbyn, how things could have been different.
Who knows? No, but having had that conversation with Robert, it was obvious that I was a Conservative, and so that's where I started.
Were your mum and dad Conservatives, do you know?
Yeah, very much. My family's always really into politics and current affairs to debate and discuss. And I remember going every Saturday round to see my paternal grandparents, and my grandfather, I can still remember him saying, "Now listen here." And he was from the South Wales Valleys. He was from the Cynnon Valley. His father had been a shopkeeper, but in a mining village. But he had been an alcoholic and had, I think, destroyed the business through his alcoholism. And my grandfather then moved down to Cardiff and became a delivery boy and then became a bus driver, but was always into current affairs. So we did lots of debating. Obviously, this was the early to mid 80s, so Thatcherism was very much part of that. I remember the miners' strike. I remember my father saying to his best friend, and they were both grew up in working class area of Cardiff, saying, if Thatcher gives in to the miners, I will give up on her, which I think is really interesting to hear another side of the story, particularly in South Wales, where it's not known even now, as a hotbed of conservatism, but there were people who really believed in Thatcher.
Now you're married, you've got 2 teenage children. When people are young, it's obviously not an exclusive rule, but if you're ever going to be left-wing, then you're going to be left-wing when you're young. How is it to have a mum who was a Conservative MP?
What's interesting, Gloria, is that I was 6 months pregnant with my son, who's now 15, with a toddler, when I first got elected. So they know nothing but me being a councillor at Westminster first and now being an MP. And they're not particularly interested, to be honest, which I think is quite healthy. Yeah, and they have their own political views, believe me, and they do tell me their political views.
You were a big figure in local government. You went on to lead Westminster Council. What's your proudest achievement in local government?
I decided that we had to show the government that there had to be changes in council tax. I was always being told by minister after minister that we couldn't change the council tax system. And it's not fit for purpose. It is so antiquated. It is based on housing values from 1991, I think it is, when I think a Band D property cost £40,000 in Westminster. You couldn't get a car parking space for that now. And I wanted to show that we actually had to do something. And people were asking me, people who were wealthier, asked me if they could pay more. And council tax is so unprogressive. So I thought, right, if the government won't let me increase council tax bands, I'm going to do a voluntary contribution, which we did. We wrote to all Band H.
That's the richest.
No, that's the highest, yeah. Look, there are a huge number of properties over, I think there's 2,000, there was in my day, 2,000 properties over £10 million in Westminster alone. And they were paying just over £700 a year.
Yeah, my God.
These guys will pay £100,000 service charge. So, look, we've got to be able to raise money proportionately and progressively. And so I did, and we raised £1 million. People got it. And then we were able to use that money to spend on rough sleeping, which is a huge problem in Westminster, more facilities for young people, and trying to combat loneliness. So I'm really proud of that.
So you get elected at the last election. You are vice chair of the cross-party group on the menopause. Why?
Because one of the reasons why I wanted to go into national politics, and I had never really thought about it, to be honest. I was very happy in local government. You know, being the leader of Westminster City Council, I don't think gets much better, really. But the time came, and it was a very difficult time in the end of 2019. My predecessor decided at the last minute to step down, and Chuck Ramuna had been selected for the Lib Dems. My seat is 72% Remain. I voted Remain. You know, I think we all feared that with a candidate like Chuck Ramuna, who looks the part, sounds the part. Personally, I don't think he is the part, but you know, he looks and sounds it. I thought we were under threat. And
Christys and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning, even if you might have thought we'd just been censored by Joe Biden.
Yes, indeed. Well, the Health Secretary has said that free parking for NHS staff working in hospitals across England will end tomorrow. Parking fees for staff were waived during the pandemic in what the Department of Health and Social Care have called a perk. The department added that the scheme had cost the taxpayer £130 million over 2 years, and now the pandemic has come to an end, so will free parking.
Yes, well, Health Secretary Sajid Javid said, quote, free parking in hospital car parks for NHS staff introduced during the pandemic will also come to an end on the 31st of March. However, over 93% of NHS trusts that charge for car parking have implemented free parking for those in greatest need, including NHS staff working overnight. Anyway, we are joined now by Peter Bone, Conservative MP for Wellingborough, who has been fighting for free parking in hospitals. Thank you very much, Peter. This is a terrible look.
Yeah, well, it's wrong. I mean, it's as simple as that. You know, if you're someone who has to go and work in a hospital, the hospital shouldn't be making money out of you by parking your car there. And, you know, many other organisations provide free car parking. So if we could do it during the pandemic, we can do it now. I mean, the only reason they're changing it is to make more money, and that's not how we should fund our NHS. We shouldn't fund our NHS out of health charging for parking. I mean, that's absurd. And I introduced a bill, a private member's bill, to make it wrong to charge patients or visitors. I mean, you know, I went to hospital with my former wife many times with cancer treatment, and there you are worrying about whether you got the right coins or credit card or press the right button on a parking machine. Adds to the stress, unnecessary and wrong.
Take your latter point there about sort of patients and visitors, because that does sort of create a class divide in terms of who can access the hospital easily. But the NHS headcount is currently 1.3 million. Many, obviously not all of those will have cars. When you start a job, it's your responsibility to pay for your own travel. In most people's cases, lots of people face train fares in the thousands. They have to pay bus fares or whatever. Why should the taxpayer foot the bill for this when we're already shelling out so much for the NHS?
Well, of course, I'm not suggesting that they pay for the travel to the hospital. I'm saying when you get there, you shouldn't be charged to make money for the hospital. These car parks, they're not a break-even operation. They're a money-making operation. The NHS shouldn't become NCP. I mean, it's not what they should be doing. Now, I have suggested to help the hospitals change to this system that the rates on hospitals should be abolished. I mean, it is absurd at the moment that if you want to expand or improve your hospital, you have to pay extra rates. Well, let's get rid of those. Give that money back to the hospital to offset anything that any costs they're incurring relating to car parking. I just think it's wrong that people who are ill are charged for parking, people who are going to visit them are charged for parking, and staff are paid for parking. It just seems to me that's the wrong way to do it. And of course, it happens in England, but I don't think it happens the same in Scotland and Wales. I think it's free.
No, indeed. When I was working as a local reporter up in Cumbria as well, there was a lady, I won't name her, who was a non-executive director of a hospital trust, and she didn't pay for parking when she went to the 4 board meetings she had a year, but actually the nurses did. And there's a divide there. Do you have any idea roughly how much it's costing these nurses on a daily basis?
Well, I mean, it depends entirely which area of the country or what that particular trust does. I mean, I mean, to great credit, many hospitals don't charge anything for parking. But others, I mean, if you go across from Westminster to St Thomas's, there's a fortune you pay for parking there. And if it could be free during the pandemic, and it cost by the government, 130 million? They pay more on paper clips in the NHS in a year for that. I mean, it's such a small amount of money. And at the time when, everyone's under pressure, of course, but the NHS staff have worked so well during the pandemic. To take away free car parking I just think it's wrong. I think it's wrong on every level. And the cost of actually installing machines to collect your money and people walking around to check that you've, are not overstayed. What a waste of money. The NHS ought to get back to looking after people. It's not a car park. It's not a car park making enterprise. It's just. I thought the Conservative Party in their manifesto, the last election, sort of promised this. And then when I brought my private member's bill in, it got a lot of support, but unfortunately we ran out of parliamentary time. But I'll reintroduce it in the next session of Parliament.
I mean, in theory, there could be an NHS worker, a nurse, say, who's let's say there's, a terror attack or something that happens, something out of the ordinary happens, and they've got to stick around, and they're going to be sitting there thinking, goodness me, I'm about to get a parking ticket. That's the last thing that we need, don't we, really, as they're doing that. And there's a recruitment crisis, as I understand it anyway, certainly a retention crisis, Peter. Maybe it's because of stuff like this.
Well, it doesn't make you look like a good employer, does it? I mean, most companies that I know of provide free parking for the staff when they come to work. I think it's ludicrous. I think if this was put to a free vote in the House of Commons, we would win. But of course, that's difficult to achieve when the government controls the order paper. I think that the Health Secretary is wrong on this. He needs to look at it again. We're putting so much money into the NHS. To take away free car parking for staff seems absurd. And I can recall that, for instance, when I was taking my ex-wife for cancer treatment, we never knew how long she was going to be in there. So we had to guess at the beginning, buy a ticket. And if she had to stay in because it was a more serious situation, I had to rush out and put money in a meter. I mean, how that's ridiculous in this day.
Peter, thank you very, very much. Peter Bone there, Conservative MP for Wellingborough. You've been fighting for free parking, of course, for a very, very long time, and hopefully you do get your way. But it is a sad day if you're just joining us, of course. It's the end of free parking for NHS staff. Do you not think it's this, thank you, Peter, do you not think it's this kind of stuff that
I have to say I disagree. I don't agree with you or Peter.
Okay.
I would bring in free parking for patients and for relatives of patients. I don't think it's fair for a health service that we pay for to charge people who are in medical need. I think that's actually quite dangerous. Having said that, I don't take Peter's argument that most employers charge.
Well, no, they don't.
That most employers don't charge you to park in their car parks.
Yeah,
I think actually most people who work do not get free parking, actually. They don't get perks for travel. They have to shell out lots of money if they want to bring in their car, and especially if you're in London, you'd be very lucky to get free parking anywhere, quite frankly. So I think it's just one of those things that's almost a fact of life. If you choose to work in a job, you have to accept that will come with some expenses. Having said that, I know lots of people will disagree with me. Having said that, when I look at the cost...
This is what I was going to say, yeah.
So £130 million, that's what the Department for Health and Social Care has said it cost over 2 years. So that's, what, £65 million a year? I mean, that does seem like a drop in the ocean for me. So if that's the true cost of what it is, actually, I think it's probably a cost worth paying and that we can get away with. But again, in principle, I don't think it's necessarily wrong to charge people to park where they work.
I'm just having a look at, so it varies per hospital trust or whatever, but it can be upwards of £17 a day. Now, that is not an insignificant amount of money, especially, no offence, but on a nurse's salary or a hospital cleaner's salary, for example. Maybe if it was like £3.50 or something.
Yeah, I think they should certainly cap it. I would wholeheartedly agree with a cap on parking for people working in hospitals and any medical centres and things like that, because I do think some of them are quite extortionate, especially if it's in London. I mean, you can get up to well in the 20s for parking over the day, and so, I take that point. But, I think in principle, I'm not necessarily against charging people to park where they work.
Fair enough. Just let us know what you think, OK? Very emotive issue, this, for a lot of people. Do you think that NHS staff should pay for their own parking at their own hospitals? Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Obviously, we'll be going to that throughout the show.
Yeah, let's go to a couple of those views now. And if the NHS... Well, my laptop's frozen again. I guess it's Joe Biden trying to sabotage our thing.
There we go.
OK, let's just put one view. What part of the problem of the NHS is that those in charge of running NHS trusts do not have a medical background. How can a businessman run the NHS if he doesn't know the product? So David there pointing to the idea that the people who make these decisions, they're not really in touch with the NHS as a profession and the medical profession.
I'm inclined to agree. Right, we're going to move away from that just now, because Australian cricket legend Shane Warne was honoured yesterday at a ceremony at Melbourne Cricket Ground. Singer Sir Elton John, he's everywhere, isn't he, Elton John? And Ed Sheeran, along with a host of Australian cricketers, paid tribute to the cricketing great.
Yes, well, joining us now in the studio to talk about Warne's legacy and his impact on the game of cricket is sports broadcaster Aidan McGee. Aidan, thank you for joining us
Morning
in the studio.
Morning.
Nice to see you in the flesh. I just want to ask you, as somebody who's not a cricket fan myself, can you just explain to someone like me the significance of Warne as a person, as a cricketer, and as well as give us some sort of idea about what his celebrations of his life looks like?
I mean, Mercy, looking at that event yesterday at the MCG, and it's not the same exactly as talking about legacy, but just look at it. I mean, I don't recall anyone getting a send-off like that anywhere in the world. It makes Diana's memorial, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa's memorial look like a tea party on Sheppey Beach. It's totally different. I mean, there are loads and loads of people there. There was the great and the good, Hugh Jackman, Kylie Minogue was there as well. As Patrick mentioned, you had Elton John, you had Ed Sheeran, loads of other people, loads of contemporaries of his as well. And in terms of what he achieved in the sport, well, we think back to the Ball of the Century in 1993, Old Trafford. One of our colleagues here, esteemed colleagues here at GB News, was actually at that match. And this is the game where it was his debut in the Ashes. He's up against legendary England player, the captain, Mike Gatting at the time. He delivers this ball down the crease. It just changes direction dramatically, going wide right and then back into the left. It stumps Gatting. His face, I mean, we can see it now on television, actually. There you go, on your screen. You can see it. Look at the change of direction there, onto the stumps. Look at Gatting's face in a moment when he walks off. I mean, that's the first time we saw Shane Warne. Here we see it again. Look, goes out to the right, back in. There you go. He's out. Now, Gatting's probably never heard of Shane Warne at this stage.
No.
Somebody I know was in the ground, as I mentioned a moment ago. It was the early days of Jumbotron screens where you can actually see replays. At first, they thought he'd hit a divot on the crease or a stone or a pebble or something like that. You get a few of those in Manchester here and there. So it changed direction, and then the crowd are waiting to see, like, that was just an aberration. It didn't really happen. And then they saw it on the Jumbotron screen, and it was just a gasp. Wow, what have we just seen? And that was his enunciation onto the Test scene. He was an extraordinary player. He transcended cricket as well. We do hear the word transcended quite a lot. It doesn't always mean a great deal. But with Shane Warne, he quit the scene in around 2007. He'd had 708 Test wickets. It's part of that all-conquering Ashes team. That was a brilliant player. He made England's side, who weren't that bad, actually, in hindsight. He made them look very, very average over that period of time. Glenn McGrath, Steve Waugh, Ricky Ponting, Brett Lee, all these guys were just the most celebrated people. And that's why Shane Warne got the send-off he had yesterday. It was almost like last night of the proms. I mean, the pictures, the screens, befitting of a man who had an enormous personality and leaves an indelible mark on cricket, no question about that.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. He provided me with some of my greatest cricketing memories. I think he did for all of us. And since his passing, I mean, even before his passing, to be honest with you, regularly I'd find myself, if I'm sat on a train or sat at home with nothing else on, just watching clips of it. Watching clips of his bowling, spell after spell after spell of just top-notch leg spin bowling. But just talk to us a little bit about some of the people who were there yesterday. I think his daughter spoke.
Yeah, his daughter's Brooke and Summer. They're in their early 20s now, maybe late teens. His son Jackson was there as well. Liz Hurley didn't make it, but she's filming a film called Summer in the Caribbean, I believe. It was contractually difficult for her to get out of it, but she did send some messages and condolences. Their relationship was understood to be very good after they broke up in 2013. I was in the hairdressers last week. It's going to be bizarre, right? I was in the hairdressers, and I was listening to someone talk, this alpha male kind of guy, this butch kind of bloke, talking about hair loss and how he's going to Turkey to have his hair changed. Now, it just got me thinking. I just thought, well, would that conversation have been as easy 15 years ago before Shane Warne really embraced it? He was somebody who was into that kind of stuff. He wanted to preserve his looks, his youthfulness, and he carried that on. So his post-cricket life, especially in commentary and things like that, and everything else he did was quite worthy of note as well.
Yeah, indeed. And I think he had an everyman feel about him, right? He was an incredibly fit, athletic guy. He didn't always necessarily look it.
No.
Loved his...
Although he did post-career, though.
He did, yeah.
He looked more like an athlete. He probably looked younger in his 40s than he did in his 20s.
Absolutely, but he was a smoker. He liked a pint every now and again. He liked his pizza, absolutely. And enjoyed himself rather a lot.
He did.
There was the odd controversy, of course.
There was, but if you consider just... I mean, he didn't take part. He was suspended before the World Cup in 2003, I think it was, he said it was slimming pills. But if you look at the legacy in terms of Australian sport, now, we all remember, people like Pat Cash, Patrick Rafter, all those contemporaries of his in the Australian cricket side, Mark Bosnich, all these Australians who stuck it in the face of British imperialism or English imperialism. He was the guy who came out of the pub with a blonde haircut and a blonde hairstyle and just terrorised batsmen, not just in England, all over the world. His Test record was absolutely fantastic and a huge miss, Patrick. I interviewed him once in the back of a cab. I said, have you got time for an interview, Shane? He goes, no, I haven't actually. But and I thought, oh, God, that's me done. That's my career over. I've sent it to get an interview and I've blown it. And he goes, yeah, well, we can go in the back of the cab if we want. We can do it there. So we got a cab from the city over to Westminster somewhere. He was on some PR junket around about the time of the 2005 Ashes. And I got the interview with him. So I'll always be thankful for that because he could have buried my career there and he decided not to. It's just about life.
Absolutely. There was a famous, a famous kind of stitch-up, really, news of the world stitch-up with Shane Warne. We don't need to go into the gory details of it, but I think we can all guess the kind of thing that he was getting up to. Anyway,
I think that was before I was at the news.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that, sorry. But anyway, the story goes that, did what he did that evening and drove back to Hampshire, slept in his car and took 9 wickets the next day.
I know. But when you've got that kind of talent, I mean, you have to remember as well the context of, in the 80s, the great West Indies sides, they were just... It was all about pace attack, all about speed of the bowling. And televisually, that's what the TV companies like. They want to see movement, they want to see pace and dynamics. Same as in football. Every rule that's been changed in the last 20 years has been designed to enhance the speed of the game, to make it more saleable around the world. And that's the way cricket was going. Spinning was kind of, it was something that happened in the 70s and it was going out of fashion. Most batsmen were alive to it. Then you get the ball of the century.
Yeah.
And then you get that ball going out wide and Mike Gatting not knowing which way to turn. And so that changes things, and that suddenly spin is fashionable again. And don't forget, the other bowlers in Australia, they could still offer pace, they could still offer a range of attack, and that's why they were an extraordinary side, and as I say, made a decent England side look very, very average nearly every time they played.
Just in terms of the circumstances of his death, what do we really know about that at the moment?
Not much has been said, Patrick. I mean, I think that it was important to mark the passing. I think that, there have been some bits and pieces circulated around social media. I'd rather not go into that right now, just because I think it's a day time for remembering him, isn't it? But there will probably be stuff coming out in the next few weeks. As I say, Liz Hurley's absence was noted yesterday, but I don't think there's too much to read into that. Actually, but we may find out more in future. Is it going to tarnish his memory? I really can't see why.
No, I don't think so. And also, so what? At the end of the day, he's passed away. He's brought us all so much joy.
Yeah. Single man as well.
Yeah, exactly. 100%, exactly that. Anyway,
well,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow night, Patrick.
Yes, you will. Yes, Friday Night Feast.
Choosing my outfit this afternoon.
Oh, good stuff.
Well, thank you for joining us. Well, that is it from us for the end of the hour, but we will be back for another hour and keep all your thoughts coming into us on GBViews at gbnews.uk. First, the weather.
Hello. Winter has most definitely returned. A cold feel out there today. Plenty of sunshine around, but some wintry showers will also continue. High pressure is moving in, bringing, as I say, plenty of sunshine. This weather front brought some wet weather overnight and a covering of snow in places. But around the high, the winds are coming down from the north, hence the cold feel, but also feeding in the moisture from the North Sea, bringing in showers down the eastern side, which will continue to have that wintry mix. Hail, sleet and some snow on the hills. A really strong, bitter wind across East Anglia and the southeast. And a few more flurries likely over the high ground across parts of Kent in particular. It does feel cold despite the sunshine further west. Temperatures only in single figures. Add on that wind and it feels much closer to freezing. As the showers keep coming in from the North Sea through the evening and overnight, it could well turn icy as temperatures tumble across northern and eastern Scotland, northeast England and southeast England too, with a continued threat of further snow over parts of Kent in particular, mostly over the hills. But as I said, it could be slippery almost anywhere we see the showers coming in. Those showers will continue to be a mixture of sleet, snow and hail. A widespread frost, certainly in the west where we'll have largely clear skies. A dry, fine start to Friday for many. Plenty of sunshine, which will melt away any frost, but still one or two showers for Pembrokeshire and Cornwall, and certainly still more to come across parts of eastern England. And again, still that wintry mix, hail showers, some sleet and snow. And then we'll see some wet weather coming south across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, again with snow on the hills and mountains across western Scotland. Again, a cold feel on Friday with temperatures still in single figures and well below average for most. Temperatures falling away on Friday night, so again it could turn quite slippery out there, particularly where we've got this wet weather working southwards with some snow likely mixed into that over the hills across the southwest on Saturday morning. High pressure moving in there, so a lot of dry but cold weather this weekend.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it. Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys. We're on your TV, radio and online with a show full of today's big stories, lots of discussion and expert guests.
Yes, well, make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We're going to be going to those throughout the show, but first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Thank you. Yes, good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian forces are preparing for new Russian attacks, with British intelligence suggesting heavy fighting is likely to take place in the suburbs of Kyiv in the coming days. This morning, President Volodymyr Zelensky was given a standing ovation as he addressed the Australian Parliament. Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced more funds and aid for Ukraine and labelled Russia's Vladimir Putin a war criminal before handing the floor to President Zelensky. He warned Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world and said stronger sanctions are still needed.
Whatever is happening in our region because of the Russian aggression, what is destroying the lives of people, has become a real threat to your country and to your people as well. Because this is the nature of the evil. It can instantly cross any distance. Russian representatives, officials, official propagandists, they are openly discussing the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who don't want to subdue.
Volodymyr Zelensky there. In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisors are scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people and that Putin's overestimated the abilities of his military to secure a rapid victory.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
Sir Jeremy Fleming there. The Foreign Secretary will urge India to join allies in opposing Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Liz Truss is in New Delhi for talks with her counterpart. It follows concerns the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is reluctant to publicly condemn Moscow's actions. India's abstained in a series of votes in the United Nations on the issue, and earlier this month it agreed to import 3 million barrels of heavily discounted Russian oil. An MSP is calling for 11,000 empty military homes to be used to accommodate refugees fleeing Ukraine. Gordon MacDonald has written to the Defence Secretary urging him to bring the unoccupied properties owned by the MOD back into use. The Home Office has announced 2,700 visas have so far been granted under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. In other news, households are expected to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living squeeze. New analysis from Labour combined tax hikes, food, energy and fuel prices, as well as mortgage costs. As the party launches its local election campaign, leader Sir Keir Starmer's pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600, funded by a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. Thousands of pounds worth of goods have reportedly been stolen from David and Victoria Beckham's London mansion. It's believed the burglary happened late in the evening while they were at home with their 10-year-old daughter at the end of February. Officers responded just after midnight on March the 1st. The Met Police say no arrests have been made and inquiries are continuing. From tomorrow, free COVID tests will no longer be available for most people under the government's new plans. Only hospital patients who have symptoms and people at higher risk of contracting the virus will be eligible for free tests. The Department of Health says it'll still be able to ramp up testing if needed. And Tesco's pledged to become the first supermarket chain to go peat-free on its British-grown bedding plants. Huge quantities of carbon are released into the atmosphere when the plant material's harvested, accelerating climate change. Tesco has promised to cut its use by 95% from Monday, and peat will be removed from its bedding plant range by next year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Mercy and Patrick with To The Point.
Good morning, everyone. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick, Christys and Mercy Muroki. We're right here on your TV, radio and online. We've got a massive show lined up for you, so here's what's coming up.
Yes, a charity has warned that unpaid carers are being hit hard by the cost of living crisis and are facing severe financial difficulties. Our reporter Anna Riley has been speaking to some of those affected, and we'll bring you that report very shortly.
Yes, and a teacher at a school in Essex is being investigated and has even been apparently suspended for sharing a mug with an image of the Prophet Muhammad on it. What roles, if any, are blasphemy laws playing in our education system? We'll be discussing that later.
It's very controversial, that one. And Hollywood legend Bruce Willis is being forced to retire because he's been diagnosed with aphasia, a condition that affects the ability to read and write. We'll be talking to the founder of a charity dedicated to help people living with the condition.
And polar ship the RRS Sir David Attenborough, better known as Boaty McBoatface, has had a successful maiden voyage during Antarctic ice trials. We'll be talking to a special guest from the British Antarctic Survey about what ice trials are and why they're so important. We have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. You can get in touch, as always, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on the very tragic case of Baby P.
There are a few criminal cases that once you hear of them will never leave you, where you'll never forget the names, never forget the mugshots, never forget the detail of the gruesome crime. For me, one of those is the case of Baby P, a case where that overused phrase, a crime that shook the nation, is, if anything, an understatement. 17-month-old baby Peter Connolly was brutally murdered in August 2007 at the hands of his mother, her boyfriend, and his brother. And as of yesterday, the parole board has granted her request for parole, deciding she should be released back into the public, that she deserves her freedom. This is a decision Justice Secretary Dominic Raab has asked the board to reconsider, however. Now, I apologise in advance for having to recall these grim details first thing in the morning. They're really not details anyone with an iota of human compassion ever wants to hear, but they really, really matter. 1-year-old baby Peter died after months of having the most heinous abuse inflicted upon him. He was found to have suffered more than 50 injuries at the time of his death, including 8 broken ribs, a broken back, and a part of his finger missing. There are certain details I will never, ever forget. In one of the many injuries he sustained, baby P had been punched so hard in the face by one of his abusers not long before his death, it had knocked his tooth out, and he had swallowed it. And who can forget the pitiful sentences handed down to the diabolical trio? Baby Peter's mum and boyfriend were cleared of murder, supposedly because of insufficient evidence. They were found or pled guilty in the case of his mum to be guilty to the significantly lesser charge of, quote, causing or allowing the death of a child or vulnerable person. The boyfriend was given a 12-year term minimum to run concurrently with a 10-year term. He was also handed down for raping a 2-year-old girl in a separate case. Baby Peter's own mother, the single person who should have been there to protect him more than any other soul, received a minimum of only 5 years. Now, here's what I think. I think our justice system has proven itself over and over again to not give a damn about children. The thought of these sadistic barbarians walking amongst us makes me sick to my stomach. I make no apologies for thinking people who harm children deserve no forgiveness. I think people who maim, torture and kill children commit a sin which is such an egregious violation of human decency and morality that at the very, very least, they must lose their right to freedom. Absolutely and permanently.
It just makes me so angry, and I'm sure everyone watching this or listening to this on radio now will be feeling the same. It's very difficult for me to find the words to express how angry I am. Not just what they did, but the meagre sentences that they were handed out, and the fact that they could be back out on the streets. All I will say is this, right? I suspect if they are let back out onto the streets that, I don't know, natural justice may take its course.
The trouble is that they'll probably be given new identities. That's commonplace. I believe the brother who has been released, I believe the brother of the boyfriend, was released and he was given a new identity. This is often the case, at the taxpayer's expense. Which is often the case because, of course, their life is at risk and every life supposedly matters, doesn't it, in this country, which is why they get new identities. Well, what about the life of baby P? What about the lives of all the children that die at the hands of these sorts of people and then they get to enjoy their freedom in a matter of years? I mean, I can't put into words what an injustice I think it really is. I think it's one of the very few things that makes me embarrassed of this country. There's not many things that I would say I'm embarrassed for being British for this very reason. But our justice system and the pitiful sentences really is one of those things.
I think, you know, if you are abusive towards a dog, for example, or several dogs, you can be banned from keeping animals, OK? Now, I don't know what the setup is here, but they should be banned from ever being around children. And I'd go to be honest with you, I don't mind saying this, quite extreme lengths to make sure that they couldn't have children anymore. Put it that way, I'm sure you can come to the conclusion that I'm drawing there. I don't see why these people should be allowed out. I talk a lot about, I don't believe that certain jihadis can be rehabilitated. I don't think anyone is capable of doing this, whether it's, and let's be honest, I mean, this is heinous stuff, raping a 2-year-old, the catalogue of abuse that baby P was put through. And it wasn't just, you know, well, I say just, it wasn't, you know, shaking him because he was crying. This was sadistic stuff designed to cause maximum amounts of pain to a toddler, right? Those people can't be rehabilitated in my book.
Yeah, absolutely not. And they certainly, at the very least, should not be allowed out ever, just on a pure moral basis.
No.
I almost don't care about the arguments for rehabilitation and all this stuff that people bring out when you say somebody should be in jail for life, that life should mean life. And then some people will start saying, oh, well, do you not believe in rehabilitation? Well, actually, no, I don't. And I'm not going to apologise for thinking people who commit these sorts of crimes should never, at the very least, and this is a kind option, I think, should be kept behind bars for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Look, your views are coming in this. Ken's been in touch. This is a problem with our whole judicial system. People in positions of influence and decisions-making, they're so out of touch, basically, is what they're saying. No way that she should be free. Agree totally. No release. Our justice system is a joke. There's a lot of this going around. GBViews at GBNews.
Yes, well, let's move on to another story now. Unpaid carers are facing financial difficulties because of the UK's current cost of living crisis. That's according to the charity Carers UK. The charity say that without urgent support from the government, many who are looking after their loved ones at home won't be able to cope with rising bills. To cope with rising bills.
0.5 million people are working as unpaid carers, looking after loved ones that are older, disabled or seriously ill. But with the rising cost of living, Carers UK have done some research that has showed that 45% of unpaid carers are unable to manage their monthly expenses, with 14% already falling into arrears with their energy bills. In the months ahead, the research shows that more than 2 in 5 thought that they won't be able to heat their homes to a safe level, with a third worrying that they'll have to rely on a food bank to feed themselves and the person that they're looking after. Now, carers' allowance is due to increase by 3.1% on April the 11th, in line with the Consumer Price Index. And payments will increase by £2.10 a week, so weekly payments will go from £67 to £69.70, and over the year that adds up to £109.20. But for many carers, Carers UK are just saying this won't be enough with the rising costs of living. I spoke to Emily from the charity, and this is what she had to say.
Unpaid carers, we shouldn't forget that they're doing an incredible job. That's families looking after family members that are ill or disabled, and the value of their support is effectively £193 billion a year. It's way above what we put into the NHS. And if they get carers allowance, the carers benefit, it's only £67.60 a week. It is the lowest benefit of its kind. And for that, they have to do at least 35 hours of care a week. And they are desperately worried about energy bills. And it's not simply a case of turning down the heating or not using it, really are stretched to the limit. So some carers have been telling us that they can't reduce their energy bills because they're running essential pieces of equipment that are keeping people alive. They can't turn the heating down because they need the heating higher for the person that they care for. Otherwise their health is put at risk. And really we need more to help them, much more. The benefit is only going to go up by £2. That's by 3.1%, and that's a fraction of the increase that they need to meet these new bills.
Like Emily said there, carers are making an enormous contribution to society and saving the healthcare sector billions of pounds. But what's it like to be a carer? Well, I spoke to Debbie Cooper. She looks after her husband, Mark. He's 50 years old. He's got motor neuron disease. He was diagnosed with the condition 3 years ago. But over the years, his condition has progressed seriously, which means that he's now unable to walk and talk, and he needs to eat with assistance. He needs round-the-clock care, which Debbie provides, as well as other carers. And this is what she had to say to me about looking after her husband.
It's just pittance, really, what you have to survive on, as well as having to look after that person and care for them and put you 100% in, also trying to juggle things with bills and things like that, because it isn't enough money for them. It just isn't. Physically, it's very, very tough because, liftings, even though Matt's a thin, he's still like a dead weight trying to lift that person. So before we had the carers in, I had to do it on my own, and found him a couple of times on the floor. Trying to lift that person on your own is pretty scary. There's been times when I've come down and thought, is he actually still with us? Because, it was just, that was tough. But mentally, it's very draining. More I found mentally, because I just found it very lonely. Because my husband is not my husband no more. Because we can't do anything what we used to do together. Absolutely nothing. He can't even hold my hand. You can give him a kiss on the cheek, but it's very challenging. Very challenging. And people make out, oh, you're so brave. It's not about being brave. It's Matt's my husband and I love him to bits, and I'll do anything what it takes to support his needs.
Now, we spoke to the Department of Work and Pensions about the Carers UK campaign to increase the carers allowance, and this is what they had to say. A spokesman said that they recognise the valuable role of unpaid carers and said that universal credit includes a carers element worth more than £160 a month, and that those in receipt of carers allowance may be entitled to other support, including benefits. They say they also understand the pressures people are facing with the cost of living. They say these are global challenges, but the government has taken action to support families worth over £22 billion. And the debate on carers allowance is set to go before Parliament. So as we have updates on this story, we will bring them to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Anna Riley there, of course. It's interesting to highlight it, isn't it? Very, very sad issue there. But we're going to go into our inbox now, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Yeah.
I understand you've got some reaction to the parking. Do you mind if I start with some reaction to your baby P
needless
stuff?
to say, most people don't think baby P's mother should be released.
No, not at all. There is no rehabilitating people like those monsters. I would go further, and then Leslie calls for the death penalty. So there we are. There's a lot of the death penalty stuff going about here, and it does every single time. Unfortunately, these things are not as rare as we would wish, these kind of cases. And every single time there is one, the death penalty argument opens up.
Yes, I mean, we've had Arthur Labinio Hughes, Star Hobson recently. Like, these things are still happening, and the system still hasn't got a grip. But we also spoke about somewhat lighter issue, it's fair to say, which is parking charges in hospitals and whether NHS staff should get free parking at hospitals, because the government is now ending that free parking they were giving staff in hospitals during the pandemic.
Yes.
Lots of you saying absolutely they should get free parking, but some people agree with me. I think they should actually cap it. I don't think the staff should necessarily get free parking. I think they should have a cap. Patients should get free parking, I think. Somebody here says it's only £25 a month to park at the local hospital, or £7 a week. You pay on exit so don't need to worry. Other people saying they had to pay to park at their work. Someone in here saying Wales is free for everyone to park, as are prescription charges. So just a thought. So postcode lottery a bit, isn't it, these things?
It is indeed. It is indeed. Right, well, look, keep these views coming in. Thank you very much, everyone. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Interesting story when we come back, actually. I think this one will get you all going. So there's a teacher being investigated for showing a mug with an image of the Prophet Muhammad on it to students. We'll be discussing that later.
Hello. Winter has most definitely returned. A cold feel out there today. Plenty of sunshine around, but some wintry showers will also continue. High pressure is moving in, bringing, as I say, plenty of sunshine. This weather front brought some wet weather overnight and a covering of snow in places. But around the high, the winds are coming down from the north, hence the cold feel, but also feeding in the moisture from the North Sea, bringing in showers down the eastern side, which will continue to have that wintry mix. Hail, sleet and some snow on the hills. A really strong, bitter wind across East Anglia and the southeast. And a few more flurries likely over the high ground across parts of Kent in particular. It does feel cold despite the sunshine further west. Temperatures only in single figures. Add on that wind and it feels much closer to freezing. As the showers keep coming in from the North Sea through the evening and overnight, it could well turn icy as temperatures tumble across northern and eastern Scotland, northeast England and southeast England too, with a continued threat of further snow over parts of Kent in particular, mostly over the hills. But as I said, it could be slippery almost anywhere we see the showers coming in. Those showers will continue to be a mixture of sleet, snow and hail. A widespread frost, certainly in the west where we'll have largely clear skies. A dry, fine start to Friday for many. Plenty of sunshine, which will melt away any frost, but still one or two showers for Pembrokeshire and Cornwall, and certainly still more to come across parts of eastern England. And again, still that wintry mix, hail showers, some sleet and snow. And then we'll see some wet weather coming south across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, again with snow on the hills and mountains across western Scotland. Again, a cold feel on Friday with temperatures still in single figures and well below average for most. Temperatures falling away on Friday night, so again it could turn quite slippery out there, particularly where we've got this wet weather working southwards with some snow likely mixed into that over the hills across the southwest on Saturday morning. High pressure moving in there, so a lot of dry but cold weather this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs, sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:26 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on GB News, live on your TV, online and radio.
Indeed. Well, a teacher at a top grammar school in Essex has reportedly been suspended for having a mug with a cartoon image of the Prophet Muhammad on it. So the image on the mug supposedly came from a satirical cartoon strip called Jesus and Mo.
Yes, while Colchester Royal Grammar School, a highly rated school, has confirmed that a staff member concerned is currently away from the school. Last year, there were angry protests outside a grammar school in Batley after pupils were shown a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad.
Well, it wasn't just angry protests, there was death threats. They called for his blood. That guy, as far as I'm aware, has still got police protection, so has his family. Anyway, joining us now to discuss this further is Dr. Rakib Hassan, Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Rakib, thank you so much for joining us. Look, to be fair, there's no need to have a picture of the Prophet Muhammad, is there? Why do these people do it?
I have no idea. To be honest, we saw what happened at Batley Grammar School. I thought there, though, that the teacher, if truth be told, was thrown under the bus by his own educational institution. And I firmly disagreed with the nature of those protests. And there were Muslim parents at that school who said they were intimidated by those protests. Down the road from me, I'm based in Luton, down the road from me in Dunstable, there was an incident where a teacher showed an image of deceased terrorist Osama bin Laden in an attempt to portray the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So you do have these cases which can offend the pupils within particular religious groups. I think that with Colchester Grammar School, it should be noted that its recent Ofsted inspections have been far from positive. Ofsted inspectors have suggested that there is a culture which doesn't necessarily promote equality and respect. And I think perhaps as a result of that inspection, this is why we've had this reaction to this particular incident.
And let's just take a bit of a step back and actually, can I ask you to explain why it is so offensive, or why the school might have taken this decision? Because a lot of people might not understand sort of the underlying reasons for this.
Sure. So, Mercy, there are followers of Islam who interpret parts of the Quran in a way that essentially images of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which are created by the human hand, this is seen to be an insult. So ultimately, this is a matter of religious sensitivities, but it's also a matter of where does sovereignty lie? especially in state-backed institutions, who ultimately has the final say when it comes to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable within British schools?
Look, I'm going to say something now. It does seem, with certain elements of the Muslim community, like there's quite often a very extreme reaction to things like this. So, death threats, for example, actual attacks or something like that. Do you not think that's a little bit much, really? Because, you know, to be fair, if I'm not a Muslim, right, and I had a mug on it here with a picture of the Prophet Muhammad on it, I wouldn't do that because it's just not the kind of thing I do. But if I did, do I deserve to die for that? It seems a bit strange for me, really.
Well, I thought the response to, for example, within certain elements of the British Muslim population to what happened up in Batley was disgraceful. If people are offended by incidents which take place within schools, or rather they have issues with the content of lessons in schools, then that needs to be expressed in a reasonable way. There are processes which can be followed. We ultimately live in a Western liberal democracy. We live in a country where there are no blasphemy laws in place. So when these kinds of incidents take place, that ultimately, if people take great offence to these kind of incidents, they need to follow proper processes and go about this in a proper and reasonable way.
Yeah, it isn't. You know, this might be controversial to say, as is a lot of things we might say on this channel be considered controversial, but it is a free country after all, isn't it? And nobody has a right to not be offended. And isn't it the case that if somebody chooses to do this and have this picture on a mug, as they are free to do in a free society, yes, they can expect repercussions for it, but isn't it the case that if we allow somebody, this school, for example, or any other institution, to cancel that person, then we are chipping away at that concept of our society being a free civil society where there are no laws against blasphemy.
No, I absolutely agree, Mercy, and I think that there's no ideology which is above scrutiny and criticism, and that includes religious ideologies. I think what I would say, though, that when it comes to freedom of expression, I think there is a debate to be had as to whether people exploit freedom of expression in order to peddle their prejudices towards particular groups, and that does have to be part of the discussion.
Yeah, no, I can understand that, definitely, and it's got potential, I suppose, really, with this particular issue now to turn into another battle. But it's not just in this country we've seen it as well. I believe there was a teacher in France, Samuel Paty, I think, who had a similar-ish issue. I think he was deemed to... He either joked about the Prophet Muhammad or said something, anyway, showed a cartoon, there you go. And he was beheaded, you know. And what do you make of perceived... some of the perceived radical elements of this Muslim religion, really? Because it does seem like it is, you know, I don't want to say it's a Muslim issue. That's far too broad brush, right? And that's not what I'm saying about it. But, you know, it is regularly elements of the Muslim community who do these kind of things.
Well, I'd make the point, Patrick, that the British Muslim population, there is not a single monolithic view when it comes to these kind of matters. I think looking at France, I think what you see there's a fundamental tension between the secular Republican Universalist culture, the French secularity, being fundamentally at odds with the socially conservative attitudes within many of France's Muslim communities. And you may well see that dynamic across a number of European democracies, including our own. And whether we like it or not, we're going to continue to have these kind of discussions while these incidents continue to take place.
Thank you very much, Rakib. Always an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Rakib Hassan there, of course, at the Henry Jackson Society. Right, now, after the break, Hollywood legend Bruce Willis is being forced to retire because he's been diagnosed with aphasia, so we'll be talking more about what that condition really means. But before that, it's a look at this morning's headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. It's 11:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian forces are preparing for new Russian attacks, with British intelligence suggesting heavy fighting's likely to take place in the suburbs of Kyiv in the coming days. This morning, President Volodymyr Zelensky was given a standing ovation as he addressed the Australian Parliament. Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced more funds and aid for Ukraine and labelled Russia's Vladimir Putin a war criminal before handing the floor to President Zelensky. He warned Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world and said stronger sanctions are still needed.
We know that our dream is undefeatable and undestructed, especially if we can count on the support of the free world, on your support, on your assistance. And like in the history that I just told, we needed not just in a couple of months, but we need it urgently now.
In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people. The Foreign Secretary will urge India to join allies in opposing Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Liz Truss is in New Delhi for talks with her counterpart. It follows concerns the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is reluctant to publicly condemn Moscow's actions. In other news, households are expected to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living squeeze. New analysis from Labour combined tax hikes, food, energy and fuel prices, as well as mortgage costs. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. It's back to Patrick and Mercy with To The Point in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. It's 11:38. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki on GB News, live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now yesterday we heard the sad news that Hollywood legend Bruce Willis, star of Die Hard, Pulp Fiction, Armageddon and many other blockbusters, has been forced to retire due to an illness.
The Hollywood hard man was diagnosed with aphasia, which apparently gives you issues with your retention of being able to read and write, etc. Speak as well, which is obviously quite important. All of those things are very important. As an actor, impacts his cognitive abilities. Many viewers and listeners might not know what it is or how it could impact their loved ones.
Yes, well, let's speak about that right now and give you some more information on that. Joining us now to explain a bit more about the condition is Barbara Chalk. She's the founder of a charity called Living with Aphasia and a retired speech and language therapist as well. Barbara, thank you so much for your time. This, I have to admit, is something I've never heard of, and I assume lots of people will be in the same position. So in layman's terms, can you just firstly explain what this condition is?
Well, it's aphasia is it's a result of a brain injury, and it affects your ability to use words. So just saying the name of your loved one, or writing the name of your loved one, or reading the headline on a newspaper might be really, really difficult with aphasia. Yet you haven't lost your intelligence. So it's one of the most frustrating conditions, and it can be very isolating. Just going to the pub and having a conversation could be really, really hard if you can't find the word or can't understand what somebody's saying, and yet you kind of know what's going on around you. So, yeah, for Bruce Willis as an actor, that's devastating.
It sounds incredibly frustrating. It must be incredibly frustrating. And how common is it?
Well, 1 in 3 people with a stroke will have aphasia, which is amazing because we probably all know somebody who has had a stroke. But aphasia can also be caused by a head injury or a brain tumour, or something that's called a primary progressive aphasia, and that's sort of like a dementia. All the others aren't a dementia, but it is much more common. It's more common than Parkinson's disease, which is incredible because we all know what that is, or I know somebody with it. And I think that's one of the most frustrating things about having aphasia is no one understands what it is. And people think, you know, you're drunk or you're stupid or, you know, what's wrong with him, and they're embarrassed. They don't know how to have a conversation with someone with aphasia. And that I've through all the time I've worked with people with aphasia, that is one of the most difficult things, the hidden disability that it is.
Yeah, and
Really
you are a retired speech and language therapist as well. I mean, is that delayed speech and reading and the cognitive sort of deterioration in that respect, is that something that can be reversed? Can you sort of be trained to be able to regain that speech and language again?
Certainly, if you've had a stroke or a brain injury or even a tumour, if the tumour kind of goes down, then you will definitely be on your way to recovery. If you've got primary progressive aphasia, that's the result of a sort of a degenerative progressive thing. So it might be more difficult for you to make progress on that. And I think all those people with aphasia hearing that primary progressive is what aphasia is. It's not. They're two different things. And I think that's important to keep that clear.
Good
so
stuff.
but if you have aphasia, you're going to make recovery from a stroke for sure. For sure.
Good stuff. Well, you're doing vital work, and thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us today. Of course, that's Barbara Chalk there, who's a retired speech language therapist, also, of course, founding Living with Aphasia, which is, well, there you go, even difficult for me to say, but there we are. Right, OK, well, we are going to go over now to something a little bit different. A P&O ferry worker has exclusively told GB News about the day he was sat on the spot whilst on board a ship in Rotterdam. He says that he was ordered back to the UK on coaches with no food, water or even a ticket home. These new revelations came amid today's deadline for P&O workers to accept or decline their compensation packages.
Yes, well, our reporter Ellie Costello has been speaking to this P&O employee and has this interview. We've kept his identity secret for legal reasons.
For staff on board the Spirit of France ferry, which was docked in Rotterdam, they were sacked via a written statement. They were told to get off the ferry and return back to the UK immediately. Many of the sacked employees had lived and worked on the ship for over 20 years. One sacked seafarer, Toby, not his real name, has told me exclusively what that day was like.
The captain said there was going to be a big announcement. He didn't sound quite right on the tannoy. Then the security guards started moving up, coming up the gangway onto the ship. They told everybody to go to the front bar, and all the security guards came along and blocked all the exits. And then some man in a suit read out his statement, and we were all told to pack our stuff, get off the ship as soon as possible, and they'd lead us to our cabins to pack. It's unbelievable. It felt like we'd been invaded by a load of pirates, to be honest with you. And then after that happened, they started bringing the crew on. I think they're all Colombians, and we're still at the front bar. That's the only time it nearly kicked off on our ship, because the crew was reacting bad enough from being sacked. And there you are. And then the agency label was taken upstairs, and our chef went upstairs to check on the staff food, and they were eating all of our staff food. Can you believe it? It's unbelievable. The way they treated us made you feel like you were worthless. You know, I mean, we've worked our butts off basically for the last 2 years, and now it's coming to the end, like at the end of a tunnel, and you're sacked. And you get repaid by being sacked on the spot and replaced by slave labour. That's what it is. Slave labour.
So why do you think it was done in the way that it was? Why do you think P&O Ferries got security involved?
The security wasn't even there for our safety. It was in case we vandalised the ship, like the French did when they got sacked, because they smashed their ships up big time. But I mean, we're not like that. We're English. We're seafarers. On the gangway, we were asked our name and then handed an envelope with our redundancy offer on it. Even if I was offered my job back, I wouldn't take it if Peter Hebblethwaite was still there. The whole system's got to change. They've got to start caring for their workers more.
And what was the journey like back home after that experience? You must have all been so shocked.
We were put onto coaches home from Rotterdam. There was no food or water all day. We had a pregnant woman on our coach who was really stressed. We finally got to the Eurotunnel, and there weren't even any tickets booked for us. Eventually, the bus driver paid for all of our tickets on a company credit card, and we all managed to get onto our competitor DFDS's ship, and they put the whole crew in the Premier Lounge, where we got free tea and coffee. They treated us better than our own company, really.
We put these allegations to P&O Ferries. In a statement, they did not deny that the sacked seafarers were not given food, water or a ticket to get home. A spokesperson has told us, "We profusely apologise for the difficulties people had during this journey. Due to reasons outside of our control, we weren't able to use the pre-arranged route, and alternative arrangements had to be made at the last minute." In response, Toby says he does not accept P&O's apology, and this statement sums up the way that they had treated their staff. He wishes instead to thank the great British public for all of their support. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Gosh, yeah, I mean, shocking stuff, isn't it, really? Completely heartless by the looks of things and bang out of order. But, you know, P&O have rumbled on nonetheless.
Yeah, they've destroyed their reputation, though, haven't they? And
Yes.
they are separate, I understand, from P&O Ferries.
Right.
Yeah, because
they're two separate things.
Because a lot of people have been getting confused about that and cancelling sort of reservations with P&O Ferries, thinking it's the same. P&O Cruises, thinking it's the same as P&O Ferries.
It's like the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea or whatever the heck that is, isn't it? But anyway, there we go. Right, now from one ship to another.
Yes, a research ship, good one there. The RRS Sir David Attenborough has completed its ice trials during its maiden voyage to Antarctica, a key milestone in the vessel's commissioning.
Well, the RRS Sir David Attenborough, and I'm just going to emphasise yet again that they ran a poll, they ran a competition to see, a public vote, to see what this ship should be called, and Boaty McBoatface won. But then he muscles Attenborough.
Makes you proud to be British, doesn't it?
You know, Attenborough comes on. Attenborough's enough. You know, does he need a ship? Anyway, whatever. It's Polar Ice Class 5 ship, which means that it is able to break through ice 1 metre thick, using its 15,000-tonne weight to break through. But what is an ice trial? Why are these expeditions so important? I think we should probably tell them that we found out.
Oh, the Titanic could have done with that level of... Anyway, Dr Andrew Fleming is the remote sensing manager for the British Antarctic Survey, the UK's National Polar Research Institute, and he joins us now. I do have to say, your job sounds pretty exciting. You get to go... It sounds like a child's dream, going off to the South Pole or whatever and seeing penguins and things like that. Tell us a bit about what your job entails, first of all.
Yeah, so you're right. I'm not going to deny it. It is an exciting job, and I'm very privileged to have it. So no denial. I'm actually head of the mapping group at the British Antarctic Survey. So we provide our scientists and our logistics people and others with a full range of maps and geospatial data, satellite imagery to support what they do.
No, absolutely. So, well, look, I suppose what's the point of it all? You know, you get to go over there, you get to explore these places, you get to smash through ice 1 metre thick. What are you really hoping for?
So we have a new ship, the Sir David Attenborough, and the point of the trial is to prove its capability. So you mentioned that it's designed to break through ice that's about 1 metre thick at a certain speed. It needs to do that at about 3 knots, just over 3 miles an hour. So we have to prove that capability. So it's one thing to design it, it's another thing then to say, right, it's actually going to do it. So that was the purpose of the ice trials, to take it down to the Antarctic, put it through some tests, and prove that it's capable of doing that. And at the same time, we then get familiar with the ship so that we can understand how best to operate it and how best to drive it.
And there's so much to discover, and there's so much of our own planet and our own world that we don't know about. We're sending things off to space all the time, but actually in places like Antarctica, you know, there's a lot to discover, isn't there?
Absolutely, incredibly so, and that's our main purpose, is to understand how this part of the world is changing and how dynamic it is and how it affects the rest of the planet. So yes, our new ship is bristling with instrumentation and capabilities that we will use in coming years and coming science campaigns to understand how things are changing. But the purpose of the last season was really to get familiar with how that all operates. It's like being handed a new Formula One car. You don't take it out and start using it at full speed right from the get-go. You need to make sure that you kind of adjust it and tune it, and you get used to it, you get the feel for it, even down to things like how it corners and how it handles. Is all sorts of things that we were testing and trialing while we were in the ice this season.
Yeah, and on that note, what is life like on this ship? Because, I mean, it's obviously a huge piece of machinery, and is it cold in there, actually? Because I hate being cold, and I'm thinking if I ever wanted to change career, maybe might not go into a career which entails me going up to the Antarctic. But what is life like on board for the people?
So it's very comfortable, actually. The ship is really nicely designed, and it was a pleasure being on board. You're right, it's cold outside, unsurprisingly, in the Antarctic, but we're well kitted out for that. On board, I'm the opposite from you. I prefer being slightly cold rather than too hot, and it was actually rather warm on board. I found it slightly too warm for me, but I'm sure we'll be able to adjust that.
Can I ask, I think we were in danger, weren't we, of this interview becoming a bit too highbrow, given the technical detail of the questions that we've asked so far, but are you disappointed that you're not now on Boaty McBoatface?
In terms of the name, absolutely not. No, I much prefer the name that's been given. I think that's highly appropriate, and Sir David Attenborough himself has been very vocal about the support that he's given and the role that the ship will play, and how proud he is to have his name on the ship. So I'm very pleased that we have such an ambassador's name on the side of the ship, and that we will carry on and to do the excellent work that he and many others are behind.
And finally, what is next for this ship? I mean, any further expeditions planned?
Huge numbers of planned expeditions. So Sir David Attenborough, the ship, is still down in the Antarctic at the moment. But towards the end of April, we'll then turn north and start heading back to the UK. There'll be a period during the summer here in the north where there's some refit and modifications to be made, some further sea trials out around the UK. And then the ship will head back down to the Antarctic towards the end of this year for the first full science trials and science campaign. And then we have many years worth of investigations and studies, data collection, and everything else that we've mentioned planned to take place. So all very exciting, and we're very much looking forward to it.
Well, we'll have to have you on again, obviously, and I'm hoping that maybe I could come on the ship. Well, it's down there, but we'll have to wait and see about that, will we? I noticed an invite wasn't particularly forthcoming, Andrew, but I'm sure I can muscle my way in. Andrew Fleming, was you about to invite me on?
Well, I was going to say that's not in my gift to issue that sort of thing out, but we'll see what's possible.
Fantastic. You've just palmed that one off on someone else. Classic delegation. No, look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, and keep up the tremendous work. Dr. Andrew Fleming there, of course, as the remote sensing manager for the British Antarctic Survey.
Yes, would you go to Antarctic?
Absolutely in a heartbeat, yes.
Would you actually? I thought you were going to say
100%.
absolutely not.
No. Antarctica,
Yeah.
the moon, they're the ones for me. I'm desperate to go to space before I die.
Not for me. I don't even want to go up into the air on an aeroplane.
No, you
I
don't
like my
fly.
feet being safely on the ground.
OK, fair
I'm very risk averse, so I don't fancy taking risky trips to outer space and other worlds.
Right, OK. Now, let's take you through some of the headlines of the day that you may have missed. A Disney executive who is in charge of content has promised to make at least half of the characters in its productions LGBTQIA, B, C, D, E, anyway, or from racial minorities by the end of the year. Sorry, I couldn't help that. It's most of the alphabet.
Anyway, General Entertainment President Carrie Burke said during a company-wide Zoom call that Disney must do more to be inclusive. Whatever happened to just making, good old movies? But anyway, what do you think? You can let us know your views about that. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I mean, I don't understand why it has to be half. Look, I'm more for representing different sorts of characters in movies. There's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But I don't get this obsession with figures, quotas. Half of all, characters will be LGBTQIA. Did I get it right?
Don't know.
OK. Well, anyway, let's go to some of your views on that note. Lots of you have been getting in touch about lots of things we've been speaking about, and in particular, the baby P's mother being let out of prison, or potentially being let out of prison. Anne here says, this is an awful display for the British justice system. She should absolutely never be let out, and I would go even further and say she deserves the death penalty.
Gosh. Well, there we go. Strong stuff to finish us on there. But that is it from us here today at To The Point. Don't go away, though, everybody, because up next is Gloria Di Piero. So make sure you stay tuned for that.
Hello. Winter has most definitely returned. A cold feel out there today. Plenty of sunshine around, but some wintry showers will also continue. High pressure is moving in, bringing, as I say, plenty of sunshine. This weather front brought some wet weather overnight and a covering of snow in places. But around the high, the winds are coming down from the north, hence the cold feel, but also feeding in the moisture from the North Sea, bringing in showers down the eastern side, which will continue to have that wintry mix. Hail, sleet and some snow on the hills. A really strong, bitter wind across East Anglia and the southeast. And a few more flurries likely over the high ground across parts of Kent in particular. It does feel cold despite the sunshine further west. Temperatures only in single figures. Add on that wind and it feels much closer to freezing. As the showers keep coming in from the North Sea through the evening and overnight, it could well turn icy as temperatures tumble across northern and eastern Scotland, northeast England and southeast England too, with a continued threat of further snow over parts of Kent in particular, mostly over the hills. But as I said, it could be slippery almost anywhere we see the showers coming in. Those showers will continue to be a mixture of sleet, snow and hail. A widespread frost, certainly in the west where we'll have largely clear skies. A dry, fine start to Friday for many. Plenty of sunshine, which will melt away any frost, but still one or two showers for Pembrokeshire and Cornwall, and certainly still more to come across parts of eastern England. And again, still that wintry mix, hail showers, some sleet and snow. And then we'll see some wet weather coming south across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, again with snow on the hills and mountains across western Scotland. Again, a cold feel on Friday with temperatures still in single figures and well below average for most. Temperatures falling away on Friday night, so again it could turn quite slippery out there, particularly where we've got this wet weather working southwards with some snow likely mixed into that over the hills across the southwest on Saturday morning. High pressure moving in there, so a lot of dry but cold weather this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like